Korean Mafia boss's baby wouldn't stop crying during the wedding until the black maid did something that shocked everyone. The infant's screams pierced through the wedding ballroom like shattered crystal, relentless and desperate. Every guest within earshot winced, shifted in their designer gowns and tailored suits, or exchanged uncomfortable glances toward the source of the disturbance. But none dared to complain, not when they saw the man holding the child. Eric Kwan sat at the head table, his posture military straight. His jaw clenched so tight, the muscle jumped beneath his skin. The custom-tailored black suit that normally made him look like a dark emperor now seemed to constrict around him like a cage. His normally cold, calculating eyes, the ones that had made grown men confess their sins, held a flicker of something foreign. Panic, raw, unfiltered panic. The baby, his daughter Maya, continued to wail, tiny fists batting weakly against Eric's chest. 6 months old and already bearing the weight of a legacy she didn't ask for. 3 months since Ji-yeon had taken her last breath in a hospital bed. Not from childbirth complications, but from bullets meant for him. 3 months since Eric Kwan, Seoul's ghost king who controlled everything from shipping ports to politicians, had become something he never thought possible. Helpless. "Sir?" One of his lieutenants leaned in carefully, speaking low enough in Korean that other guests couldn't hear. "We could take her to the hospital. Leave the reception." "No." Eric's voice was still wrapped in silk-covered steel. "We stay. This is family." But the baby didn't care about family obligations. She didn't care that her father controlled half of Seoul's underground operations, that men crossed streets to avoid his shadow, that entire rival gangs had disappeared at his word. The infant only knew hunger, discomfort, and the absence of the warmth she'd known for 3 precious months before it was stolen away. Eric had tried everything. Bottles prepared by nannies who were paid more than surgeons. Formula imported from Switzerland. Pacifiers that the child spat out with surprising force for someone so small. Rocking motions that felt awkward in his arms that were more accustomed to signing contracts in blood than soothing cries. Nothing worked. 3 days. 3 days of this relentless crying. 3 days of watching his daughter waste away, refusing every bottle, every comfort. The pediatricians had warned him this morning. 1 more day of refused feeding, and Maya would need hospitalization. Feeding tubes, intervention. Across the ballroom, hidden among the catering staff in her crisp blue and white uniform, Vera Brantley heard the desperate cries and felt her body respond instinctively. Her breasts ached with sympathetic letdown, milk threatening to soak through the nursing pads she still wore, despite the fact that she closed her eyes, forcing down the wave of grief that always came with that thought. 3 months, It had been 3 months since she'd held her own daughter. 3 months since the tiny heart, born too soon and too small, had simply given up fighting. Complications from premature birth, the doctors had said, as if putting medical terminology to the nightmare made it hurt less. Vera was working this high-profile wedding through a staffing agency, taking any job that paid cash and didn't ask too many questions about the gaps in her resume. She had been a nursing student once before pregnancy had derailed everything, before her daughter had arrived at 28 weeks, before 3 months of NICU hell had ended in a funeral she couldn't afford. The crying intensified, and Vera felt tears prick her own eyes. She knew that sound, the desperate, hungry wail of an infant who needed something primal, something only a mother's body could provide. Her hands trembled as she gripped the serving tray. "Are you all right?" Another server paused beside her, concerned. "You look pale." Vera looked up, then back toward the head table, where the crying originated, toward the terrifying man with the dragon tattoo and dead eyes, holding a dying baby. That baby needed her, and God help her, she needed that baby too. Vera's feet carried her across the marble floor before her brain could catalog all the reasons this was insane. The champagne tray slipped from her fingers, crystal shattering against the floor in a spray of expensive French bubbles. Heads turned, conversations died. But all Vera could hear was that baby's desperate, weakening cry. "Miss, you can't..." A server grabbed her arm, eyes wide with panic. Vera pulled free and kept walking, her maid's uniform suddenly feeling like the only honest thing in this room full of designer lies. She wove between tables where men with dead eyes and women dripping in diamonds watched her like she was a fascinating accident about to happen. The crying pulled her forward like a rope around her chest. She was 10 feet from the head table when the wall of muscle materialized. 3 bodyguards, each one broad enough to eclipse the chandelier light, formed a barrier between her and the man holding the dying infant. The one in the center had a scar that split his eyebrow, and the kind of stillness that came from knowing exactly how many ways he could kill her. "Back away," he said in Korean, then English. "Now." Vera's hands trembled violently, but she locked her knees to keep from collapsing. This close, she could see the baby's face, flushed red, mouth open in exhausted screams, tiny body convulsing with each breath. She could see the father's hands shaking as he tried to soothe his daughter, his knuckles white with desperation. "Sir!" Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "Sir, I can help your baby." "Please let me try." The bodyguard's hand moved toward his jacket. "You need to leave." "Let her speak." The man's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Eric Kwan's eyes lifted to meet hers, and Vera felt the full weight of what it meant to be seen by someone who could unmake lives with a word. His gaze was black ice, assessing, calculating, but beneath it lurked something Vera recognized because she saw it in the mirror every morning. Grief, the kind that ate you alive from the inside out. She stepped closer, ignoring the bodyguard's growl. "I know why she's crying like that. I know what she needs." "You're a doctor?" His English was perfect, barely accented, each word precisely chosen. "No, I'm..." Vera's breath caught. "I'm a mother. Was a mother. I can help her. Please." Around them, the wedding reception had gone silent. 200 guests watching this impossible tableau. A black woman in service uniform confronting Seoul's most dangerous crime lord. Vera heard gasps, whispers in Korean that she didn't need to understand to know they were scandalized. She didn't care. That baby was dying. Eric stared at her for 3 heartbeats that felt like hours. Then he stood, Maya still screaming in his arms, and nodded once. "Follow me." The bodyguards closed in around them as Eric moved through the ballroom, creating a protective corridor that guests parted for like Moses and the Red Sea. Vera followed, her legs threatening to give out, her breasts aching with milk meant for a child 3 months dead. They walked through a door hidden behind silk drapes, down a corridor lined with more armed men, into a private room that probably cost more than Vera's entire life. Eric turned to face her, and Vera saw the cracks in his armor, the exhaustion carved into the lines around his eyes, the way his hands gentled on his daughter despite the tremor running through them, the desperation of a man who'd tried everything and watched it all fail. "What do you need?" His voice was rough now, stripped of its earlier control. Vera looked at the baby, then at the 4 bodyguards who'd followed them in, then back at Eric. "Privacy, and I need to nurse her." The head of security, the scarred one, stepped forward immediately. "Sir, this is..." "Everyone out." Eric didn't raise his voice, but the command in it made grown killers flinch. "Sir, protocol requires..." "You can watch from the door." Eric's eyes never left Vera's face. "But you will not interfere. Am I understood?" The bodyguards retreated to positions by the entrance, close enough to intervene, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Vera's hands shook as she settled into an antique chair that probably belonged in a museum. Eric approached slowly, like he was afraid any sudden movement might shatter this fragile moment, and carefully transferred his daughter into Vera's arms. The weight of the baby hit Vera like a physical blow. Maya was so light, so fragile, her little body hot with fever and exhaustion. For a moment, Vera couldn't breathe past the memories. Her own daughter, just as small, just as helpless, slipping away despite everything the doctors tried. Then Maya turned her head, seeking, desperate, and instinct took over. Vera adjusted her uniform, positioned the baby, and felt Maya latch on with a ferocity that spoke of days without relief. The baby's screams cut off instantly, replaced by desperate, hungry suckling. Silence crashed through the room like a wave. Eric dropped into the chair across from them, his face transforming. The hard edges softened, the ice in his eyes melted into something human and raw. He watched his daughter feed like he was witnessing a miracle, his hands gripping his knees so tight his knuckles went white. Vera felt tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't stop them. Maya was drinking like she'd been lost in a desert, her little fists kneading against Vera's chest, her body finally relaxing. Minutes passed, The baby's desperate gulps slowed to steady, rhythmic pulls. Her flushed face began to return to normal. Her tiny body went slack with relief and exhaustion. When Maya finally released and fell into unconscious sleep, Vera looked up to find Eric staring at her with an expression she couldn't name. Gratitude, wonder, something else that made her stomach flip. You saved her life. His voice was barely a whisper, rough with emotion he clearly wasn't used to expressing. I've tried everything. Specialists, formula, medicine, nothing worked. She was dying and He stopped, jaw clenching. How did you know? My daughter, Vera said quietly, adjusting Maya in her arms, unable to let go yet. She was premature. I nursed her for 3 months before. She couldn't finish, didn't need to. The understanding in Eric's eyes said he already knew how that sentence ended. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And for a moment, he wasn't a crime lord. He was just a father who'd almost lost everything. What's your name? Vera. Vera Brantley. Vera? He said it like he was memorizing it. Then he reached into his jacket, making the bodyguards tense, and pulled out a business card. Heavy stock, embossed with a dragon insignia. He wrote something on the back in sharp, angular handwriting. My address. Come tomorrow, please. Name your price. Vera looked at the card, then at the sleeping baby in her arms, then at the man who clearly didn't know how to beg but was doing it anyway. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This was a world of violence and power, and she was just a woman trying to survive her grief. But Maya sighed in her sleep, a tiny sound of contentment, and Vera felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd thought died with her daughter. Tomorrow, she heard herself say. I'll come tomorrow. She didn't know then that by agreeing, by feeding this baby, she'd just activated ancient codes written in blood and tradition. She didn't know that in the world of Korean American crime families, a woman who nurses the boss's child becomes bound to that family forever. She didn't know she'd just signed a contract that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with survival. All she knew was that for the first time in 3 months, she'd felt something other than grief. And it terrified her. If you're already wondering whether Vera just made the biggest mistake of her life, you need to subscribe. Because what happens next will change everything she thought she knew about survival, love, and the price of saving a stranger's child. Hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where this goes. The address led Vera to a neighborhood where even the gates looked like they cost more than her annual salary. Tall stone walls topped with cameras that tracked her approach. Manicured hedges that probably required a team of gardeners. Houses, no, estates, set so far back from the street they were barely visible. Vera clutched her purse tighter and told herself she could still turn around. The bus stop was only 2 blocks away. She could go back to her studio apartment, back to her grief counseling sessions, back to the slow process of learning how to breathe again. Then she thought of Maya's desperate face, and her feet kept moving forward. The gate opened before she could buzz the intercom. Smooth and silent, like it had been expecting her. A camera swiveled to track her progress up the curved driveway. Vera's heart hammered against her ribs as the main house came into view. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress, disguised as luxury. 3 stories of modern architecture and traditional Korean elements, surrounded by more cameras than a bank. Men in dark suits stood at strategic positions around the grounds, speaking into earpieces in rapid Korean. Their jackets didn't quite hide the bulges at their hips and shoulders. Vera stopped walking. This was insane. She was a nursing assistant from Atlanta who'd come to Korea to escape her memories, not to get tangled up with organized crime. Whatever Eric Kwan was offering, it wasn't worth dying for. The front door opened and a man stepped out. Not Eric, someone older. With silver at his temples and eyes like a shark evaluating prey. His suit probably cost more than her car. He descended the steps with the precise movements of someone who'd killed people and slept fine afterward. Miss Brantley. His English was formal, accented. Welcome to the Kwan estate. I am Mr. Han, head of security. Please, come inside. It wasn't a request. Vera followed him through doors that looked thick enough to stop bullets into a foyer that could have doubled as a hotel lobby. Marble floors reflected chandelier light. Art that belonged in museums hung on walls. Everything was beautiful and sterile and designed to remind you exactly how much power resided here. More guards stood at intervals, their attention snapping to her as she passed. Vera heard Korean words she didn't understand but could feel. Questions, maybe warnings, definitely judgment. She was hyper-aware of her secondhand coat, her worn shoes, the way she didn't belong in this world of polished violence. Mr. Han led her through hallways lined with more surveillance equipment than she'd known existed, past rooms where she glimpsed men hunched over computer screens and weapon racks that made her stomach turn. This wasn't just a home, it was a command center. They stopped outside a door, flanked by 2 more guards. Mr. Han knocked once, then opened it without waiting for an answer. Eric Kwan stood at floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, Maya in his arms. The morning light caught the dragon tattoo on his neck, made his black clothing look like shadow given form. He turned as they entered, and Vera saw the exhaustion etched into his face. The kind that came from days without sleep. Miss Brantley. Relief flooded his expression. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Maya whimpered in his arms, a sound that went straight to Vera's chest. The baby looked worse than yesterday. Paler, thinner, her little face pinched with distress. She hasn't eaten? Vera asked, already moving forward. She took 1 bottle at midnight, screamed for 4 hours after, refused everything since. Eric's voice was tightly controlled, but Vera heard the fear underneath. The doctors say if she doesn't eat today, they'll need to hospitalize her. Insert feeding tubes. He paused, jaw clenching. I need to tell you something before we go further. Vera stopped, every instinct screaming danger. Eric handed Maya to a woman who appeared from a side door, a nanny, exhausted and anxious, then turned his full attention to Vera. You asked my name yesterday. I didn't give it. That was intentional. He gestured to the chair facing his desk. Please sit. Vera remained standing. Who are you? I run the Kwan Syndicate. We control shipping, imports, certain political interests in Seoul and 3 other countries. He said it like he was describing a legitimate business, but Vera wasn't stupid. She'd watched enough news, heard enough whispers. Syndicate was a polite word for what Americans called the mob. Her blood went cold. You're telling me you're a criminal. I'm telling you, I'm a man whose enemies killed my wife 3 months ago to hurt me. I'm telling you those same enemies would kill anyone I care about to watch me suffer. I'm telling you that if you help my daughter, if you become important to us, you become a target. His eyes bored into hers. I'm giving you a chance to walk away before that happens. Vera should have run, should have walked straight out that door, caught the next bus, maybe the next flight back to Atlanta. Instead, she looked at Maya in the nanny's arms, saw the baby's labored breathing, the way her little body trembled with exhaustion. Let me see her. Eric nodded to the nanny who brought Maya over. Vera took the baby carefully, and Maya immediately turned her face into Vera's chest, seeking, crying weakly. Up close, Vera could see the dehydration in the baby's skin, the sunken quality around her eyes, the way her lips had started to crack. This wasn't just hunger anymore. This was a child on the edge of organ failure. Please. The word came out of Eric like it physically hurt him. He moved closer, and Vera saw his hands shaking. Please, I'm begging you. She's all I have left. I've tried everything. Specialists from Switzerland, traditional medicine, different formulas, different bottles, 5 nannies in 3 days. Nothing works. She's dying and I'm... His voice cracked. I'm powerless. All this money, all this influence, and I can't save my own daughter. Vera looked at this dangerous man reduced to begging, looked at the baby dying in her arms, looked at Mr. Han, watching from the doorway with cold calculation. Every logical neuron in her brain screamed that this was how people disappeared in news stories, how women ended up as cautionary tales. But Maya whimpered, and Vera's body responded. Milk letting down, breasts aching, empty arms that had held her own dying daughter, remembering what it felt like to actually help. 1 week, she heard herself say. I'll stay 1 week to help her transition to bottles. After that, I'm gone. Name your price. $50,000. It was more money than she'd made in 5 years, an absurd number chosen specifically so he'd refuse and she could escape with her conscience intact. Done. Plus room and board. Eric was already moving to his desk, pulling out papers. I'll have my lawyers draw up a contract guaranteeing your freedom after 7 days. You'll have your own suite, full security, anything you need. I need to be able to leave. He looked up, and something flickered across his face. The gates will open for you any time. But Miss Brantley, understand, Once you're identified as important to Maya, once the wrong people know you've helped us, leaving might be more dangerous than staying. Then I'll take my chances. Vera adjusted Maya, who had stopped crying and was making small rooting motions against her chest. 1 week, then I disappear and you forget I existed. 1 week? Eric agreed, but something in his tone made Vera think he was lying. What he didn't tell her, what he maybe didn't fully realize himself, was that in the world of Korean-American organized crime, certain traditions ran deeper than contracts. A woman who nursed a boss's heir didn't just help. She became bound by codes written generations ago, codes that said she was now family, now protected, now owned. Eric didn't tell her that by accepting his offer, she'd just become the most valuable leverage his enemies could want. He didn't tell her that some contracts couldn't be broken with signatures. All he said was, "Thank you." And the weight in those 2 words suggested he understood exactly what he was asking her to sacrifice. Vera looked down at Maya, who had finally stopped trembling, who was looking up at her with eyes that held the same desperate hope Vera's own daughter had once had. She thought about her empty apartment, her empty arms, her empty life. 1 week, she whispered, and let herself believe it was true. Mr. Han found Vera in the nursery on her second morning, watching Maya sleep in the elaborate crib that probably cost more than most people's cars. The baby had nursed twice during the night, finally keeping down a bottle afterward, and Vera had allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Hope. "Miss Brantley," Mr. Han's voice was flat, emotionless. "We need to speak." Vera followed him to a study lined with books in Korean and English, the kind of room designed for delivering bad news in civilized surroundings. He closed the door and didn't offer her a seat. "You should understand what you've done." He clasped his hands behind his back, military precise. In traditional Korean-American organized families, a woman who nurses the boss's heir is considered to have formed a blood bond. You are now, in the eyes of our world and every syndicate that matters, Maya's mother. Vera's stomach dropped. "That's insane. I'm helping a baby eat. That doesn't make me—" "It makes you family." Mr. Han's expression didn't change. "More specifically, it makes you Mr. Kwan's claimed woman, his property by extension. Every rival syndicate now sees you as legitimate leverage against him." The room tilted. Vera grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. "I'm not property. I'm not anyone's wife. I signed a contract for 1 week. The contract Mr. Kwan drew up protects you legally, but tradition supersedes law in our world." Mr. Han moved to the window, his silhouette sharp against the morning light. "The moment you fed Maya in front of witnesses at that wedding, word spread. By yesterday afternoon, every major family in Seoul knew. By this morning, photographs of you entering this compound were circulating through encrypted channels." Vera felt bile rise in her throat. "You're telling me I'm trapped. I'm telling you that leaving now would be suicide. Mr. Kwan's enemies will assume you know things, have access, matter to him. They'll use you to hurt him, whether that's true or not." He turned to face her, and for the first time something like sympathy flickered in his eyes. "You saved the child's life. That makes you valuable. Valuable things require protection." "I want to talk to Eric. Now." Mr. Han's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "He's in a meeting, but he anticipated this conversation. He asked me to tell you that he doesn't expect you to play any role beyond caring for Maya. He won't force you into anything, but he also won't lie to you about the danger." Before Vera could respond, the door opened. A younger man in tactical gear entered, holding a tablet. He said something in rapid Korean to Mr. Han, whose expression hardened to stone. "What?" Vera demanded. "What is it?" Mr. Han took the tablet, studied it for a long moment, then turned the screen toward her. Vera's breath stopped. It was a photograph of her from yesterday, entering the compound gates. Someone had edited it, added crosshairs over her face, Korean characters she couldn't read but understood anyway. A target, a threat, a promise. "The Choi family," Mr. Han said quietly. "They killed Maya's mother 3 months ago. Retaliation for Mr. Kwan taking their territory in Busan. They're letting us know they found his new weakness." Vera's legs gave out. She collapsed into the chair, staring at her own face, marked for death. "This can't be happening. I just wanted to help a baby." "And now that baby's enemies are your enemies?" Mr. Han took the tablet back. Mr. Kwan is assigning you a personal bodyguard. You cannot leave the compound alone. You cannot contact anyone outside without our knowledge. You cannot. I can't be a prisoner. You can be a protected asset or a corpse, Miss Brantley. Choose. The door opened again, and Eric strode in, still wearing the suit from whatever meeting he'd left. His eyes went straight to Vera, taking in her pale face, her shaking hands, his jaw clenched. Out, he said to Mr. Han and the tactical officer. Not a request. When they were alone, Eric knelt in front of Vera's chair, putting himself at eye level. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried in every calculated movement. I'm sorry, he said simply. I should have explained before you agreed. Should have told you that my world doesn't let people leave once they're marked as important. Your second in command says I'm your claimed woman. Your property. Vera's voice shook with rage and fear. Is that what you think I am? No. Eric's answer was immediate, fierce. You're a woman who saved my daughter's life, who gave me hope when I had none. I don't own you, Vera. I never will. But others... He stopped, choosing his words carefully. Others will see you as mine, as leverage, as something they can take to destroy me. So I'm trapped. You're safer here than anywhere else. He reached for her hand, then stopped, letting his own fall to his knee. The Choi family murdered my wife because they couldn't touch me directly. They targeted someone they thought I loved, and they were right. I won't let that happen again. I won't let them touch you. You barely know me. I know you saved Maya when every doctor said she was dying. I know you're still lactating 3 months after losing your own child, still carrying that grief, and you used it to heal mine. I know you're braver than most of my soldiers. His eyes held hers, dark and intense. And I know that in the 5 minutes it took Mr. Han to show you that photograph, I calculated exactly how many people I'd have to kill to keep you safe. So no, I don't own you, but I will protect you with everything I have. Vera wanted to scream, to run, to wake up from this nightmare. Instead, she thought of Maya upstairs, finally sleeping peacefully. Thought of the baby's desperate cries, her thin little body, the way she'd latched on like Vera was salvation itself. I want to see her, Vera whispered. Eric stood, offering his hand. This time she took it. They found Maya awake in her crib, making soft, cooing sounds that babies make when the world finally doesn't hurt. When she saw Vera, her whole face transformed. Her mouth opened in a gummy smile that hit Vera like a physical blow. Those tiny hands reached up, grasping at air, at possibility, at the woman who'd fed her and held her and refused to let her die. Vera lifted Maya from the crib, and the baby immediately nuzzled into her neck, making contented sounds. Not hungry, not hurting, just wanting to be close. She's never done that, Eric said quietly from the doorway. Not even with her mother, not really. Isabella was sick after the birth, couldn't hold her much before... He didn't finish. Vera swayed gently, the way all mothers do, and Maya's eyes started to drift closed, safe, secure, loved. And Vera realized with crystal clarity that she couldn't leave this child, couldn't walk away and condemn Maya to more screaming, more starvation. More desperate searches for comfort that no one else could provide. In saving this baby, she'd bound herself more thoroughly than any gang tradition ever could. I'm already in too deep, she said, not sure if she was talking to Eric or herself. I know. Eric moved closer, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat. But I promise you, Vera, I'll keep you safe, both of you. Vera looked down at Maya, who had fallen asleep with one tiny hand fisted in Vera's shirt. She thought about the crosshairs over her face, the death threat from people who'd already killed once to hurt this man. She thought about her empty life in Atlanta, her grief counseling sessions that never actually healed anything, her apartment full of ghosts. At least here, she could save someone. 1 week, she said, but it sounded like a lie even to her own ears. Eric didn't call her on it. He just watched her hold his daughter, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with tradition or obligation or ancient gang codes. It was simpler and far more dangerous than that. It was the beginning of something neither of them could afford. The first feeding happened at 2 a.m. on Vera's 4th night. She'd moved into the guest suite, more of an apartment, really, with its own bathroom, sitting area, and panic button that Eric had shown her with uncomfortable necessity. Maya's nursery was next door, the connecting door left open so Vera could hear the baby's first whimper. She was there before Maya's cry fully formed, lifting the baby from the designer crib. Settling into the rocking chair that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, Maya latched on immediately, that desperate urgency from the first days replaced by comfortable routine. Vera was humming a lullaby her own mother used to sing when she heard the door open. Eric stood in the threshold, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt instead of his usual armor of expensive suits. The dragon tattoo on his neck extended down his shoulder, she could see now, and without the formal clothing, he looked younger. More human, more dangerous in an entirely different way. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I heard her cry, wanted to make sure. It's fine, she's okay." Vera adjusted the blanket around Maya. "Just hungry." Eric moved into the room but kept his distance, leaning against the changing table with his arms crossed. He watched them in silence for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "My wife never got to do this," he said finally. "Isabella. She developed complications after the birth. Infection. Hemorrhaging. By the time the doctor stabilized her, she was too weak to nurse. We had to use formula, and Maya screamed through all of it. Isabella died thinking she'd failed as a mother." His voice was carefully controlled, each word precisely placed. "She died because of me, because I made enemies who wanted to hurt me, and the easiest way was through her." Vera looked up at him, this terrifying man reduced to confessing in a nursery at 2 a.m. "It wasn't your fault, wasn't it?" His laugh was bitter. "I chose this life, built this empire, made this world where everyone I love becomes a target. Isabella knew what I was when she married me, but she thought love would be enough protection. It wasn't. They shot her car up 3 months after Maya was born. 17 bullets. She died in the ambulance, and all I could think was that I'd killed her as surely as if I'd pulled the trigger myself." Maya had stopped feeding, had fallen back asleep in Vera's arms. Vera stood carefully, moving to place the baby back in her crib, then turned to face Eric fully. "My daughter was born at 28 weeks, she said. "Premature labor they couldn't stop. She weighed 2 pounds, 3 ounces. So small I was afraid to touch her." The words came easier than they had in months. "For 3 months I lived at that hospital. I pumped every 2 hours, I held her skin to skin, I sang to her, I prayed, and she fought so hard, Eric. She fought so hard to stay alive." "What was her name?" "Jasmine." Vera smiled through tears. "She died from complications her lungs couldn't handle, just stopped breathing one night and there was nothing anyone could do. The doctor said I did everything right, but it didn't matter. She still died." Eric moved closer and Vera didn't step back. "She died because medicine failed, not because of you. And Isabella died because someone wanted to hurt you, not because of you." Vera met his eyes. "We both carry guilt, that isn't ours, don't we?" Something shifted in the air between them. Eric reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a tear from her cheek. His hand was rough with calluses, scarred across the knuckles, but his touch was impossibly gentle. "You sing to Maya," he said quietly. "In English." "Songs I don't know, but she responds to your voice like nothing else. My mother used to sing them to me. I sang them to Jasmine." Vera's voice broke. "I swore I'd never sing them again after she died. But when Maya needed comfort, they just came out." "Thank you," Eric said, "for giving those songs to my daughter." They stood too close in the dim nursery, the city lights of Seoul filtering through expensive curtains, a sleeping baby between them and the entire criminal underworld waiting outside. Vera should have stepped back, should have maintained professional distance, should have remembered she was supposed to leave in 3 days. Instead, she asked, "The scar on your chest, I saw it yesterday when you were holding Maya. What happened?" Eric's hand dropped from her face. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he pulled his shirt over his head in one smooth motion, and Vera's breath caught. The scar was massive, a puckered line that ran from his collarbone to his sternum, with smaller scars branching off like tributaries. Bullet wounds, knife marks, burns. His entire torso was a map of violence survived. "Assassination attempt 2 years ago," he said. 3 men broke into my home. They got close enough to put a knife through my ribs, missed my heart by an inch. I killed all 3, but Maya was in the next room, newborn, screaming, and I was bleeding out on the floor, wondering if they'd sent more, if she'd die because I couldn't protect her. Vera reached out without thinking, her fingers tracing the longest scar. Eric went absolutely still under her touch, barely breathing. "You lived," she whispered. "I didn't have a choice." She needed me. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm flat against his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat. "Like she needs you now." The moment stretched between them, charged with things neither could say. Then Maya made a soft sound in her sleep, and they both smiled, the tension breaking into something warmer. Over the next 3 days, it became their routine. Eric would find reasons to be in the nursery during feedings. They'd talk in whispers while Maya slept. He told her about building his empire from nothing, about the brother he lost to a rival syndicate, about the impossible choices that came with power. She told him about growing up in Atlanta, about her mother who died when she was 19, about nursing school and the dreams that died with Jasmine. The cultural and class barriers that should have kept them apart dissolved in those late-night hours. It didn't matter that he was Korean American and she was Black, that he'd killed people and she'd spent her life saving them, that he lived in a fortress and she'd barely kept her apartment. They understood each other's grief, and that understanding became something neither expected. On the 6th night, one day before her contract ended, Vera stood at the nursery window, watching Eric play with Maya on a blanket. He was making silly faces, his entire demeanor transformed from the cold crime lord she'd first met. Maya giggled, actually giggled, and reached for his face with her tiny hands. Vera didn't hear him come up behind her until he spoke. "You're crying." She was. She hadn't realized. "It's the anniversary." Of the day Jasmine died. Eric's arms came around her from behind, careful, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't want to. She let herself lean back against his chest, let herself take comfort from someone who understood loss in all its suffocating complexity. "You're allowed to grieve," he said quietly, "for as long as you need." They stood like that, watching his daughter play, and Vera felt something in her chest crack open. All the walls she'd built to survive her daughter's death, all the careful distance she'd maintained, crumbling under the weight of this impossible connection. Eric turned her to face him. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing away tears. "This is impossible," she whispered. "Nothing about us has been possible," he answered, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative. A question she answered by pressing closer. Then it deepened into something desperate and hungry. 3 months of grief and isolation and unexpected connection spilling over into something they both needed and couldn't afford. When they finally pulled apart, Maya was watching them with wide eyes from her blanket, and Vera laughed through her tears. "Your contract ends tomorrow," Eric said, his forehead pressed against hers. "Stay, not for a week. Stay with us." "Can I ask you something? Have you ever felt a connection with someone that logic said was impossible, but your heart insisted was inevitable? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if you're feeling this story the way I felt it when I first heard it, subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be shared. Every rational part of Vera's brain screamed this was insane. He was a crime lord. She was a target now. They barely knew each other. This wasn't love. It was trauma and proximity and shared grief. But Maya made a happy sound, and Eric looked at her like she was the answer to prayers he didn't know he'd been saying, and Vera thought about going back to her empty apartment, her empty arms, her empty life. 3 more days, she heard herself say. Give me 3 more days to think about it. Eric smiled, sad and understanding. 3 days, but Vera, I'm going to spend every one of them showing you reasons to stay. He kissed her again, softer this time, and Vera let herself believe that maybe impossible things could survive anyway. She didn't know that those 3 days would change everything. She didn't know that impossible was about to become catastrophic. The explosion hit at dawn. Vera woke to the sound of the world ending, a deafening roar that rattled her bones and shattered the windows inward in a spray of glass. The floor bucked beneath her like a living thing. Alarms screamed. Men shouted in Korean and English. Automatic gunfire tore through the morning air. She was moving before her brain caught up, stumbling through smoke toward Maya's nursery. The connecting door had been blown off its hinges. Plaster dust choked the air. Through the haze, she could see Maya's crib had been thrown across the room, and her heart stopped completely until she heard the screaming. The baby was on the floor, tangled in blankets, but alive. Vera dove for her, covering Maya's body with her own as another explosion rocked the compound. Chunks of ceiling rained down. The chandelier crashed somewhere behind them. Vera pressed Maya's face against her chest and ran. The hallway was chaos. Guards sprinted past in tactical gear, weapons drawn. Mr. Hahn appeared from the smoke like a demon, blood running from a cut on his forehead. He grabbed Vera's arm, hard enough to bruise. "Basement! Now! Move!" He half-dragged her down a stairwell as the building shook again. Maya's screams had gone hoarse, raw, terrified. Vera held her so tight she worried she'd hurt the baby, but loosening her grip wasn't an option. Not when the world was exploding around them. They burst into a reinforced room lined with monitors showing security feeds from around the compound. What Vera saw made her stomach drop. Armed men in black tactical gear swarming through breached walls. Bodies on the ground, some in Eric's colors, some not. Fires spreading through the east wing. The gates blown open, vehicles pouring through. Eric stood at the center of it all, orchestrating defense through a headset, his voice cutting through the chaos with lethal precision. When he saw Vera covered in dust and blood that might not be hers, holding his screaming daughter, something feral passed across his face. "Get her to the panic room!" he ordered Mr. Hahn, then crossed to Vera in 3 strides. His hands were gentle, despite the violence in his eyes, as he checked Maya for injuries, then Vera. "Are you hurt?" "No, Eric, what?" "The Choi family." His jaw clenched so hard she heard teeth grinding. "They've bombed the East Wing. They're demanding I surrender you by midnight, or they'll kill my cousin's family. His wife, his children." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "They want the woman who saved Maya. They want you." The room spun. Vera felt Maya trembling against her chest, heard the gunfire getting closer, and made the only choice that made sense. "Then give me to them. I'll go. Eric's response was volcanic. His hands tightened on her face, not hurting but absolutely possessive. "I would burn Seoul to the ground before I let them touch you. I would kill every member of the Choi family and salt the earth where they stood. You are mine, Vera. Mine to protect, mine to keep safe, and I will die before I let them take you. People are going to die. People are already dying." His control cracked, showing the monster underneath. "I've been at war my entire adult life, but this is different. You're different. I will not give you up. I will not let them use you. I will not." He stopped, breathing hard, and pulled her and Maya against his chest. For just a moment, he was simply a man holding the 2 people who'd become his entire world. "Please, trust me. Let me protect you." Another explosion. Closer this time. The monitors showed the perimeter falling. "Sir!" A guard burst in. "They've breached the main house. We have maybe 5 minutes." Eric released Vera, his mask snapping back into place. He turned to Mr. Hahn. "Get them to the panic room. Lockdown protocol. No one goes in or out without my authorization." The panic room was a vault disguised as a wine cellar, walls reinforced with steel, air filtration, enough supplies to last weeks. Eric sealed them inside, and the sudden silence after the chaos was deafening. Maya's cries echoed off metal walls. Vera swayed with her, singing through her terror, trying to calm a baby who could feel that the world had become dangerous. Eric worked a tablet, pulling up security feeds, his expression growing darker with each swipe. "They've cut power to the West Wing, disabled the gate controls, set fires to flush us out." He looked at Mr. Hahn. "They infiltrated our security. Someone's been feeding them information." "Sir, we need to evacuate you." "No." Eric's voice was steel. "I hold this compound. I do not run." But the monitors told a different story. The Choi forces were overwhelming Eric's defenses through sheer numbers and inside knowledge. For every attacker that fell, 2 more appeared. They were losing. Mr. Hahn pulled Eric aside, speaking in rapid Korean. Vera watched Eric's face transform from determination to something like anguish. He argued back, his voice rising, but Mr. Hahn cut him off with words that sounded like orders despite Eric being the boss. Eric turned to Vera, and she saw death in his eyes. Not his own death, the death of everything he'd built, everything he'd been, traded for the lives of two people he'd known less than 2 weeks. "There's a tunnel," he said quietly. "Emergency exit that runs under the compound. It comes up 3 blocks away in an abandoned subway station. Mr. Han will take you and Maya, get you to a safe house. My people will extract you to Taiwan, then America." "What about you?" "I buy you time." He said it like it was simple, like sacrifice was easy. "I hold them here while you run." "Eric, no." "There's no other choice, Vera." He crossed to her, brushed dust from her hair, touched Maya's tear-stained face. "They want me to watch you die." "I won't give them that satisfaction. I won't." His voice broke. "You saved her life. Now let me save yours." "Sir!" Mr. Han had his weapon drawn, was opening a hidden door in the panic room's back wall. "We're out of time." Eric kissed Vera, hard and desperate and goodbye. And then he kissed his daughter's forehead, and Vera saw tears cutting through the dirt on his face. "Take care of her," he whispered. "Both of you, be happy. Forget this life. Forget me if you have to. Just be safe." "Eric, go, now. That's not a request." He physically pushed her toward Mr. Han, toward the darkness of the tunnel. "He'll follow you anywhere, Miss Brantley," Mr. Han had said once. Now Eric was proving it by letting her go, by staying behind to die so she could live. The tunnel was pure darkness, barely wide enough for Mr. Han and Vera to move single file. Maya had gone quiet, shock or exhaustion stealing her voice. Vera pressed the baby against her chest and ran, counting her steps, hearing explosions muffled through earth and concrete. Behind them, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of renewed gunfire. Eric making his stand. They emerged into the Seoul night through a rusted subway grate. The city spread out above them, oblivious to the war being waged in its underworld. Mr. Han pulled Vera toward a waiting car, his phone already out, barking orders in Korean. Vera was 3 steps from safety when she saw them. 6 men materialized from the shadows, weapons drawn. Not Eric's people. Wrong colors, wrong faces. Mr. Han shoved Vera behind him, fired twice, dropped one attacker. Then something hit him from behind and he went down hard. Vera ran. She didn't think, didn't plan. Just ran with Maya clutched against her chest. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed. Maya started crying again, and Vera wanted to cry with her because she could hear footsteps behind them, getting closer, and she knew she wouldn't make it. A hand grabbed her hair, yanked her back. Vera spun, fighting like a wild thing, using her body to shield Maya. She got an elbow into someone's face, heard a satisfying crunch, then something sharp jabbed into her neck. The world went syrupy and wrong. Her legs stopped working. She was falling, and all she could think was to protect Maya, to curl around the baby even as darkness crept in from the edges. Through the haze, she saw Eric explode from the subway entrance. Blood on his face, his suit torn, his gun raised. He was screaming her name, shooting at the men surrounding her, trying to fight his way through an impossible number of enemies. The last thing Vera saw before the drug pulled her under was Eric's face, anguished and desperate, as someone's rifle butt caught him across the temple, and he went down. Then a voice, cultured and cold, speaking accented English. "Hello, Miss Brantley. You're very valuable to us. Sleep now. When you wake, we'll discuss your worth." Darkness swallowed her whole. Vera woke to silk sheets and morning light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Seoul's skyline. For a moment, still drugged and confused, she thought she was back at Eric's compound. Then memory crashed in. The explosion, the tunnel, the capture. Maya. Vera jerked upright, panic clawing at her throat, and nearly sobbed with relief when she saw the baby sleeping in an antique bassinet beside the bed. Someone had changed Maya's clothes, fed her, kept her safe while Vera was unconscious. "She's quite beautiful, your little one." Vera spun toward the voice. An older man sat in a chair by the window, wearing an expensive suit and an expression of polite interest. He had the kind of face that belonged on corporate boards, distinguished and grandfatherly, completely at odds with the armed guards standing at attention behind him. "Who are you?" Vera's voice was raw. "Director Choi. Please forgive the dramatics of your arrival. My men can be overzealous." He gestured to a tea service on the table beside him. "You've been asleep for 8 hours. You must be thirsty, and I imagine the child will need feeding soon. Vera looked at Maya. At the locked door, at the windows that probably wouldn't open, at the cage made of luxury and polite conversation. Where's Eric? Mr. Kwan is alive, if that's your concern. Injured, quite badly, I'm told, but his people extracted him before we could finish our business. Choi poured tea with steady hands. He'll come for you, of course. That's rather the point. I don't understand. Don't you? Choi's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're worth more than you know, Miss Brantley. You're the first thing Eric Kwan has loved in 3 months, the first vulnerability he's shown since I killed his wife. Vera's blood went cold. You killed Isabella. Collateral damage in a larger war. He said it like he was discussing stock prices. I'd taken out his wife to hurt him, expecting grief to make him sloppy. Instead, it made him more dangerous. He retaliated by killing both my sons and taking control of the port territories I'd held for 30 years. An impressive move, but one that required consequences. So this is revenge. This is justice. Choi stood, moving to the window. 10 years ago, Eric Kwan was nobody, a lieutenant in his uncle's organization, hungry and smart, but ultimately expendable. Then he systematically destroyed every obstacle between himself and power. He killed the Choi heir, my eldest son, over a territorial dispute. Started a war that cost me my youngest as well. Took everything I'd built and made it his own. He turned to face her, and for the first time, Vera saw the rage beneath his civilized exterior. Now, I will return the favor. I will take everything he loves and make him watch it die. Starting with you and that child. Maya chose that moment to wake, whimpering. Vera lifted her from the bassinet, her body responding automatically despite her terror. The baby needed to eat, nothing else mattered. You may nurse her, Choi said, settling back into his chair like this was a social visit. In fact, I insist. We need both of you healthy and alive. Leverage loses value when it's dead. Vera wanted to scream, to throw something, to fight. Instead, she settled into a chair and fed Maya, because the baby was innocent in all of this and deserved comfort, even if the world had gone insane. Does he love you? Choi asked conversationally. Eric, I mean. I think he does, the way he fought to reach you before my men tranquilized him. Quite touching, really. He killed 6 men with his bare hands. Nearly made it to you before we stopped him. If you hurt him. Oh, I won't hurt him, not yet. Choi leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I'm going to let him come for you. Let him walk right into the trap I've prepared. Because men like Eric Kwan, Miss Brantley, men who've built empires on blood and fear, they think love is strength. They think caring for something makes them human again. But love is weakness. Love makes you predictable. And predictable men die. He won't come alone. I'm counting on it. Choi's smile widened. He'll bring his whole organization, his soldiers, his weapons, his carefully constructed power base. And I'll destroy all of it. His empire, his people, his legacy, everything he's built will burn. But first, I'll make him watch you die. Make him understand that all his strength, all his violence, all his control means nothing when it comes to protecting the people he loves. Maya had finished nursing, had fallen back asleep in Vera's arms. Vera held her tighter, this innocent baby caught in a war between monsters, and sang softly to keep herself from breaking completely. You have a lovely voice, Choi observed. Eric's wife never sang to the child. She was weak, that one, died too easily. You, though, you're stronger, more interesting. You'll last longer when I start hurting you. Eric will have to listen to your screams for hours before you finally break. Vera met his eyes, forcing steel into her spine, despite the terror flooding her veins. You're going to lose. Eric will kill you. Perhaps, but not before I take everything that matters to him. Choi stood, brushing invisible lint from his suit. He'll come. They always come for what they love. And when he does, Miss Brantley, I want you to watch. I want you to see the exact moment Eric Kwan realizes that love didn't save him. It destroyed him. He moved to the door, then paused. The room is comfortable, I trust. Good. Rest while you can. Feed the child. Sing your songs. Tomorrow, we begin in earnest. Tomorrow, I send Eric proof that I have you. And then we simply wait for love to lead him to slaughter. The door locked behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing. Vera looked down at Maya, sleeping peacefully against her chest, and felt tears streak down her face. Eric was alive. Hurt, but alive. And he would come for them. She knew that with the certainty of her own heartbeat. He would trade his empire, his life, everything, because he loved them, and that love would kill him. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the sleeping baby. "I'm so sorry." Outside the windows, Seoul glittered and moved, oblivious to the war being waged in its shadows. Somewhere in that city, Eric was preparing to walk into a trap. Somewhere, the clock was ticking down to a confrontation that could only end in blood. Vera held Maya closer and sang through her tears, because it was the only thing she could do, the only power she had left in a game played by men who dealt in death. She sang and waited for the end to come. Eric arrived at sunset, alone. Vera watched from the third-floor window as a single black car pulled through the estate gates. No convoy, no army of soldiers. Just one man stepping out with his hands raised, shoulders squared, despite the obvious pain in his movements. Even from this distance, she could see the bandages on his head, the way he favored his left side, the blood staining his white shirt. "Quite dramatic," Choi murmured beside her, watching through binoculars. "He's not even armed. Remarkable." Vera's hands trembled as she held Maya, who'd been fussy all day, as if sensing her mother's terror. Below, Eric walked slowly toward the main entrance, where 20 armed guards waited. He moved like a man walking to his execution, but his head was high, his steps steady. "I'm here," his voice carried through the open window, amplified by the evening quiet. "Let them go," Choi smiled. "Bring him to the garden. Let's make this civilized." They dragged Vera downstairs, Maya crying in her arms, through hallways lined with priceless art and the armed men who ensured this palace was also a prison. The garden was traditional Korean, carefully manicured with a koi pond and stone pathways designed for meditation, a grotesque setting for what was about to happen. Eric stood in the center, surrounded by guards, his eyes finding Vera immediately. The relief that flooded his face nearly broke her. He looked at her like she was oxygen, like the past 48 hours had been drowning, and seeing her alive let him breathe again. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, desperate. "Did they touch you?" "We're okay," Vera managed, though nothing about this was okay. Choi descended the steps with theatrical slowness, his hands clasped behind his back like a professor about to deliver a lecture. "Mr. Kwan, thank you for accepting my invitation. Let's skip the performance." Eric's voice was granite. "You want me to kneel? I'll kneel. You want me broken? I'm already broken. Just let them go." "Oh, but I do enjoy a good performance." Choi circled him like a shark. "Tell me, what are you offering for the woman and child?" Eric didn't hesitate. "Everything. My entire empire, all territories, Busan, Incheon, the port operations in Taiwan, my shipping routes through China and Japan, every political connection I've bought over the past decade, access to my accounts, offshore, domestic, all of it. My weapons caches, my safe houses, my organization's complete structure and personnel." He paused, meeting Choi's eyes. "Everything I've built, everything I am, it's yours. Just let them walk away." Vera felt tears streaming down her face. He was surrendering a criminal empire worth billions, power that made governments nervous, the only life he'd ever known. For her. For a baby that wasn't even his by blood. For two people he'd known less than a month. "My empire for the woman and child," Eric said, and slowly, deliberately, dropped to his knees. The garden went silent. Even the koi seemed to stop moving. A man like Eric Kwan didn't kneel, not for enemies, not for anything. But there he was, hands at his sides, head bowed, offering everything to save them. "Done." Choi's smile widened. "I accept your surrender. Generous terms, really." Eric looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "Then let them go. I'll sign whatever you want. Transfer documents, testimony, whatever proves I've given you everything. Just let them leave." "Oh, I'll let them leave," Choi said pleasantly. Then he pulled a gun from his jacket and pressed it against Vera's temple. "I'll let them leave in body bags." "Did you really think I'd honor a deal with the man who murdered my sons?" The garden exploded into motion. Guards raised weapons. Eric surged to his feet, but 3 men grabbed him, forced him back down. Vera felt the cold metal against her skull, smelled gun oil and her own terror, and clutched Maya so tight the baby screamed. "This was never about territory," Choi hissed in her ear. "This was about making him watch you die, making him understand that love doesn't save you, it destroys you." Eric was fighting against the men holding him, wild and desperate, screaming her name. Blood ran from where they'd reopened his wounds. His eyes were pure agony, watching the gun at her head, completely powerless. In that moment, Vera understood she had one chance. One move before Choi pulled the trigger and ended everything. She twisted hard, sank her teeth into Choi's wrist with all her strength. He howled, the gun jerking away. Vera dropped straight down with Maya pressed against her chest, hitting the stone pathway hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Then the world turned into thunder. Snipers materialized on the estate walls. Eric's snipers. Windows shattered as infiltrators poured through. The guards holding Eric went down in sprays of red, and suddenly he was moving, a knife appearing in his hand from nowhere, slicing through anyone between him and Vera. The garden became a battlefield. Automatic weapons fire shredded the carefully maintained trees. Men died screaming. Blood turned the koi pond dark. Eric moved through it all like a force of nature, unstoppable, devastating, making his way toward her with single-minded purpose. Vera crawled behind a stone bench, covering Maya with her body, singing frantically to drown out the sounds of men dying. The baby's screams were nothing compared to the violence erupting around them. Then Eric was there, dropping to his knees beside her, hands running over her, and Maya checking for injuries. I've got you both. You're safe now. Behind you. Eric spun, fired twice without looking, and a guard dropped. He pulled them behind better cover as his team, because of course he'd brought a team, of course the surrender had been a distraction, systematically eliminated Choi's forces. The firefight lasted maybe 3 minutes but felt like hours. When the gunfire finally stopped, the garden looked like a war zone, bodies everywhere, blood on the stones, smoke drifting through shattered windows. And there, trying to crawl toward an exit, was Director Choi. Eric stood slowly, his gun trained on the old man's head. He walked forward with the mechanical precision of a predator that had cornered its prey. Vera watched him transform back into the monster, watched the man she loved disappear behind the crime lord who'd built an empire on violence. Choi rolled onto his back, blood bubbling from his chest. Do it! Pull the trigger! Prove you're still the monster I remember. Eric's finger tightened on the trigger. Everything in his posture said he wanted this, needed this, had earned this kill through blood and suffering. Eric! Vera's voice cut through the violence, through his rage, through everything. She stood on shaking legs, Maya in her arms, and walked toward him. Eric, please, don't. He didn't lower the gun. He tried to kill you. Both of you. He murdered Isabella. He's destroyed everything. And if you kill him, what are you? Vera reached him, placed her hand over his on the gun. We need you, Eric. Not the monster, not the crime lord. We need the man who held his daughter at 2 a.m., who sang off-key lullabies when he thought I wasn't listening, who chose to kneel in front of his enemies to save us. Her voice broke. Choose us. Choose life, please. Eric's hand trembled. His face was anguished, torn between vengeance and redemption. He deserves to die. He does, but you deserve to live. Vera pressed closer, letting him feel Maya between them, alive and safe. You deserve peace. We all do. Don't let him take that from us. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. Then Eric's hand slowly lowered. The gun dropped to his side. He looked at Choi with disgust rather than rage. You're not worth it, he said quietly. You're not worth losing them. He pulled out his phone, made a call. Within minutes, representatives from the Neutral Syndicate Council arrived, the governing body that mediated between families, that kept the underworld from devouring itself. Eric handed Choi over with evidence of his crimes, his violations of code, his attack on neutral ground. Let them decide his fate, Eric said. I'm done. He turned his back on the old man, on the violence, on everything, and pulled Vera and Maya into his arms. He was shaking, blood-covered, traumatized, but alive. They were all alive. I thought I'd lost you, he whispered into her hair. Never, Vera answered. Never again. They sat in the ruins of Choi's garden as Eric's team secured the estate and medical personnel tended to the wounded. Maya had finally cried herself into exhausted sleep in Vera's arms. Eric held them both, refusing to let go, his face buried in Vera's hair like he was memorizing her scent. I would have done it, he said quietly. Surrendered everything. Every territory, every connection, every dollar. 1,000 times over, I would have knelt before that monster if it meant you walked away. I know. Vera turned to look at him, seeing past the blood and violence to the broken man underneath. You terrified me, showing up alone, offering your entire life. It's not a life without you. Eric pulled back enough to cup her face, his hands impossibly gentle despite the violence they'd just committed. None of it matters, Vera. The empire, the power, the respect men give me out of fear. It's nothing. It's empty. I built all of it to prove I could survive in a world that tried to kill me. But surviving isn't living. Eric. I'm done. The words came out with fierce certainty. I'm done with this life. Done with violence and territory wars and watching everyone I love die because of choices I made a decade ago. My cousin can have it all, the syndicate, the operations, the whole empire. I don't want it anymore. Vera stared at him, hardly daring to believe. You're serious? I want to leave Seoul, leave Korea, take you and Maya somewhere safe, somewhere quiet, somewhere she can grow up without bodyguards and bulletproof cars and the constant threat of death. His voice cracked. Somewhere you can finish your nursing degree. Somewhere we can be a family without the weight of the underworld crushing us. That's your entire identity. Everything you've built was built on sand. Eric's eyes were intense, desperate for her to understand. You showed me what actually matters. You walked into my life and saved my daughter when all my power couldn't. You made me feel human again after years of being a monster. You made me want to be better. He paused, swallowing hard. I love you, Vera Brantley. Not because some ancient tradition says you're mine. Not because you fed my daughter. I love you because you're brave and kind, and you sing off-key and you cry over children who aren't yours. Because you see the man I could be instead of the monster I am. Tears streamed down Vera's face. I never thought I'd love again. After Jasmine died, I thought that part of me died too. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life just existing, surviving but not living. She touched his face, traced the scar from the explosion. Then you and Maya crashed into my life like a bomb, and suddenly I was feeling again, caring again, terrified again, but also alive in a way I haven't been in months. I love you too, she whispered. God help me, I do. And it terrifies me because everyone I love dies, and you live in a world where death is currency. Not anymore. Eric took her hand, pressed it over his heart. Marry me, not because tradition demands it, not because you nursed Maya. Marry me because I love you and I want to build a life with you. A real life. A safe life. Somewhere Maya can grow up without guns. Somewhere we can have more children if you want them. Somewhere we can just be. Us. Vera looked at Maya sleeping between them, at Eric's desperate hope, at the garden littered with bodies that represented the life he was offering to leave behind. Every logical part of her brain said this was crazy. You didn't marry a man you'd known 3 weeks. You didn't uproot your life for a criminal trying to go straight. You didn't risk your heart again after it had been shattered so completely. But logic hadn't saved Maya. Logic hadn't brought Vera back from her grief. Logic had nothing to do with the way her heart raced when Eric walked into a room, or the way Maya reached for her with complete trust, or the way this impossible family had become the only thing that made sense in a senseless world. Yes, she said, and watched his face transform with joy. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I want to leave this world behind. Yes, I want to build something real with you. Yes, to all of it. This moment, right here, this is why I tell these stories. 2 broken people choosing healing over revenge, life over legacy. If this resonated with you, if you believe in second chances and impossible families, I need you to subscribe. Be part of a community that believes love is always worth fighting for. And comment below, tell me what you would have done in Vera's position. Eric kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning, like she was salvation and redemption and everything good he'd never thought he deserved. Maya woke up between them and made a happy sound, and they both laughed through their tears. Portland, Eric said. Or maybe Seattle, somewhere in the Pacific Northwest with rain and trees and people who don't know my name. I'll work security, legitimate security, corporate stuff, no criminal ties. You'll finish your degree. Maya will go to normal schools and have normal friends, and never know that her father once controlled half of Seoul's underworld. That sounds impossible, Vera said. Everything about us has been impossible. Eric pulled them both closer. But we're still here, still alive, still fighting for something better. Maybe that's enough. Maybe, Vera agreed. It's everything. They sat in the ruins of the old world, holding each other, and planned their escape into something new. Something clean, something chosen rather than inherited or forced or bound by tradition written in blood. It would take months to arrange, transferring power, satisfying the Syndicate Council, ensuring their safety. But for the first time since his wife's murder, Eric had something beyond survival to fight for. He had hope. 2 years later, Vera stood in a small garden in Portland, Oregon, wearing a simple white dress and holding a bouquet of wildflowers Maya had helped pick that morning. The ceremony was intimate, maybe 30 people, mostly Eric's cousin's family, and a few friends Vera had made at nursing school. No bodyguards, no bulletproof glass, just string lights and laughter, and the kind of peace she'd thought existed only in dreams. Eric waited at the makeshift altar in a suit that cost a fraction of what he used to wear, but made him look more handsome than any designer label ever had. His eyes never left her face as she walked toward him, and Vera saw in his expression everything they'd survived to reach this moment. Maya toddled ahead of her in a flower girl dress, scattering petals with intense concentration. At 2.5, she was thriving, bilingual, healthy, with no memory of the violence that had marked her first months. She called Vera Mama and Eric Appa, and sometimes asked why they didn't live in Korea anymore. Because we like trees, Eric always told her, which was both true and the simplest version of a much darker story. The ceremony was brief, officiated by a retired judge who had no idea he was marrying a former crime lord to the woman who'd saved them both. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promises of protection and partnership, of choosing each other every day, of building a family based on love rather than obligation. When Eric kissed her, Vera heard their small gathering applaud. But mostly she heard Maya's delighted squeal and felt the absolute rightness of this moment. The reception was held at their modest home, a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood where the biggest danger was raccoons getting into the garbage. Eric had purchased it cash, under a legal name that had no connection to the Kwan Syndicate. He worked as a security consultant now, advising legitimate corporations on threat assessment. The pay was a fraction of his former income, but he came home every night without blood on his hands. Vera had graduated from nursing school last month, top of her class, and had accepted a position at a children's hospital. She still couldn't work NICU. The memories of Jasmine were too raw, but pediatric care let her help children without the constant reminder of what she'd lost. They were halfway through dinner when a town car pulled up outside. Vera tensed automatically, old instincts screaming danger, but Eric just squeezed her hand. It's okay, I invited them. 3 men in expensive suits emerged. Vera recognized one, Mr. Han, looking older but still carrying himself like a weapon. The other 2 were strangers, but their bearing marked them as syndicate. They approached with formal deference, and the eldest, a man about Eric's age, bowed slightly. Mr. Kwan, Mrs. Kwan, congratulations on your marriage. Director Choi, Eric acknowledged. Not the same Choi who'd tried to kill them. That man had died in syndicate custody, his crimes against code too severe to forgive. This was his nephew, who'd inherited what remained of the family and spent 2 years rebuilding its reputation. We bring official documentation. The younger Choi produced an ornate folder. The Syndicate Council has formally recognized your retirement. All outstanding obligations are satisfied. You are, as of today, completely free of the organization.